Darwin showed that the whole diversity of life was interconnected. What that left unsolved was exactly how did the diversity of plant life, or indeed animal life for that matter, how did it fit together? Who was related to who? What exactly did the family tree look like? Darwin knew that the family tree was out there. What he didn't have any means of addressing was exactly how all of these different forms were interrelated.
At the time of Darwin, when he examined the record of the earliest flowering plants, he found there was a time when there were no flowering plants, and then suddenly there was a time when flowering plants were there and they were full-formed. Then he expressed this as an abominable mystery.
It's a nice Victorian word, and I think abominable because it sort of defied his understanding. He wanted to go deeper. He knew there was something there that needed to be understood, and I think it was sort of gnawing away at him, maybe annoying him.
Well, it's exciting to be back.
Solving that abominable mystery is what Dilcher and Sunga are trying to do. They've returned to the site of Sun's original discovery in Beipiao, China, to learn more about the fossil's original habitat.
It's important too. Oh, look at that.
Is the Archifructus one of those early evolutionary stages of flowering plants that Darwin looked for? A prototype, or early test model, for the flower.
From
this specimen, we can see the root system is very weak or underdeveloped. This is typical of aquatic plants.
You've got to break a lot of rock to find anything. Oh, yeah, here's some plant material. Yeah.
Look, this one. Looks like the fish. This one.
Oh.
Yeah.
At the time Archifructus was living, this area was a large inland lake, and Dilcher and Sunga believe Archifructus evolved at the edge of the lake. But ancient fossils can be interpreted in different ways.
Archifructus is not the first flower. It's a very interesting fossil, but it's not the oldest.
Elsa Marie Fries, a leading paleobotanist in Stockholm, has analyzed Archifructus as well and disagrees with Dilcher and Sunga.
We still have a long way to go before we know the truth about the roots of the flowering plants.
Fries believes that Archifructus shows signs of having adapted to live in the water, which would mean that it is a more evolved plant and not the first flower. She too is looking for the world's oldest flower, but has taken a different route. Instead of breaking open rocks, she started sifting through ancient sediments, looking for bits of leaves and seeds.
We used rather coarse sieves, but then we found out that there was a lot of small things also floating away, and we then started using finer sieves.
Hour after hour, Fries would sort through the fragments of plants. Then one day she saw something that startled even her. By looking piece by piece at these bits of plants, she discovered that some of them were tiny, whole flowers.
It was very exciting to see, of course. It was fantastic. There were so many details preserved.
Here were flowers, millions of years old, that are, in effect, still in bloom. In very special sediments, these tiny flowers had turned into charcoal and were preserved intact.
Here you can see the petals in white. In being three-dimensionally preserved, they keep their original shape so that you can see the position of the various organs.
The oldest of these tiny flowers has been found to be 120 million years old. For Archifructus to be the first flower, it must be older. That kept the pressure on Sunga and Dilcher to prove just how old Archifructus really was. And the doubts were growing.
There are a number of problems in claiming that anything is the first flower. One is you've got to be absolutely sure on the timing that it really is the first, and that's not an easy question to resolve. And then you've got to assume that at the same time there was nothing else out there. So you have to assume that what you've found is the only thing that was around at that time, which of course is in a way an absurd assumption, because we know in the fossil record wherever you look that there's more that we don't know than that we actually know about.
Sunga and Dilcher dated Archifructus at just over 140 million years old, based on the other fossils found in this area. This put it in the Jurassic period, the age of dinosaurs. No one had ever found a flowering plant from the Jurassic period. It was the botanical equivalent of breaking the sound barrier, and it led to its own kind of explosion. Archifructus graced the cover of Science magazine and the pages of the New York Times. This ancient plant had a very modern 15 minutes of fame.
Archifructus surprised me because it was a little too advanced to have been, at least to fit my model of the earliest flowering plant. So I was quite skeptical of the age, of the date, and I went back and began to investigate.
Leo Hickey at Yale University has taken another approach to tracing the first flower, a kind of scientific reading of the tea leaves.
Leaves can actually tell us a surprising amount about evolution. A leaf is the principal way in which a plant engages its environment. That's its light capturing device. And small changes in the orientation of the leaf or the vein pattern will make a big difference in the yield of sugar for the plant.
Hickey discovered that leaves have very different patterns in their veins, and understanding those patterns was a clue to their evolution.
This is a very primitive and disorganized pattern. There's very little regularity to the veins that lie in between these thicker veins. The thicker veins themselves sort of wander around a bit. This is a much more advanced leaf. You'll notice the veins, they're very straight.
The most advanced leaves have veins that are straighter and efficient like good plumbing.
Modern leaves are just better engineered. Evolution works on an economic model. Those that can make it cheaper and quicker and more efficiently are the ones that are probably going to survive.
But leaves can only take you so far in this analysis. The electron microscope brought into focus previously unseen detail of plant pollen. Pollen is far more common in the fossil record than are leaves.
Leaves are found here and there. Pollen can be found in many, many sediments. The pollen evidence was the nice dating tool.
Seeing the intricate details of individual pollen grains allowed scientists to identify the distinctive pollen from flowering plants, and then figure out when that pollen began showing up on Earth. Their answer?
The very earliest flowering plant pollen shows up in rocks which are of Cretaceous age, which is about 134 million years in this case.
This was a startling discovery. It could help answer Darwin's question about when flowering plants began, but it puts into doubt the age of Archifructus. How could Archifructus be almost 10 million years older than any known flowering plant pollen? The only sure way to find out was to date the Earth that encased Archifructus. A team from Berkeley, California and China measured the radioactive decay in minerals from the fossil site. The results were not what Sunga and Dilcher had hoped for. The new evidence moved the fossil's age from 144 million years old to 124.6 million, which was more in line with the pollen evidence. This still means that Archaefructus is the oldest known complete flowering plant fossil, but it moved it from the Jurassic period to the early Cretaceous, something of a paleontologic demotion.
The focus changed suddenly to the fact that, oh, this is a paleobotanical mistake. Here is an incorrect age. And that disappointed me quite a bit because I was interested in the excitement of the early flowering plants. And even the fact that it was 14, 16 million years younger than we initially reported it, it still was the most complete, earliest record of flowering plants that we have available.
In the spectacular Hengduan Mountains, the scientific controversy about Archaefructus seems much less heated. But what is happening here is revealing new clues to what these arguments are all about. The way the family tree was sorted out for centuries was by comparing various features of plants, like their leaves or pollen. Differences in these structures were indicators of evolutionary change and the basis for figuring out where it belonged on the family tree. A beautiful example of how to classify different-looking plants into related species can be seen in the flowers that carpet these mountains in spring. The rhododendron. There are less than 30 wild species in North America, yet more than 500 in China. The rhododendron has thrived here because of its ability to adapt and develop new species.
Look how small these leaves are. As the Tingzhang Plateau rose, these plants adapted to the higher altitude. Their leaves became smaller, thicker, and grew hair. This is an adaptation to prevent moisture loss in the cold climate and strong winds of high altitude.
Look